Scott Ramsay, who is a photographer and writer, is joining me in studio. Thank you so much for being here this morning.
Thanks for letting me come. Thank you.
Well, it's more than a pleasure. We're here to talk about your project, Year in the Wild. Why don't you tell me what it is and how it came about?
Sure. Year in the Wild is a project where I travel to South Africa's most special protected areas and wildest areas. And I'm a photographer and a writer. And essentially I travel around the country for most of the year, documenting and photographing these places, interviewing the people who work in the parks, the rangers, the scientists, the researchers, the other travelers, essentially telling the story of these places. And it came about, I guess I was pushed and I was pulled. I was working in the corporate world in Johannesburg, and I wasn't enjoying going to work at an office in a suit and tie every day. And I used to look outside my window in Sandton and look out across the Highveld to pretend I could see elephants and baobab trees in the Kruger Park. And so I guess the corporate world sort of pushed me out, but then I was also pulled. I've always had a deep love for nature, and for wild places and for wilderness areas. And the more I read about these places, the more I wanted to travel to them. And so I was very fortunate when I was growing up, where my family and used to go to some of the national parks around Southern Africa. And so for me, really, it was it just happened organically, and it was the right thing to do.
Okay, well, you don't only do this for yourself. You obviously share your photos and your writing via social media and on your website. Why is it important for you to share your experiences with everyone else?
Sure. Well, I really do believe that our national parks and in Africa and our wilderness areas in Africa, I really do believe they are the most special places on the continent. They define Africa, they give Africa its identity. And I believe that they have enormous attraction to people all over the world. And not only South African people, not African people, but people all over the world really want to see these places because they are simply, for me, some of the finest wilderness areas in the world. And they are rapidly diminishing. Human transformation of the land has really decimated most of Africa's wilderness. In South Africa, about 90% of the country has been transformed in some way through agriculture, mining, urban sprawl, and things like that. And when you consider that 100 years ago there used to be treks of millions of springbok across the Karoo, those days are already over. So what we've got left are really important symbols of our African identity. And so besides the natural heritage and conserving the natural heritage, people love going to these places. I've met so many people who from around the world, and South Africans who consider a place like the Kruger Park to be their favorite place on earth. And why is that? Well, I think perhaps it's because originally we came from these places, and there's a real visceral connection to wild animals and wild places. And I think life makes sense for people when they visit these places. They are able to recalibrate their moral compasses and who they are as people, and it's enormously beneficial from that respect as well. Yeah.
Now it's called Year in the Wild, your project. Did you spend 1 year doing this?
Yes, so I started in June of 2011. That was my first year in the wild, and I was only going to do 1 year. And then I traveled all over South Africa to about 35 protected areas, including all the 19 national parks. And then at the end of that, it went so well, and people really enjoyed seeing the photographs and sharing their experiences as well of going to these places, that I decided to do another year. My sponsors have been very good to me, and they suggested as well that I do another year. And so this year I'm doing South Africa's protected areas in different seasons, so some of the same areas in different seasons, but then also the transfrontier parks on the borders of the country. So going into southern Namibia, Botswana, Mozambique, Zimbabwe, Swaziland. Just come from Swaziland, had some amazing experiences there. And so yeah, this year is just going slightly further north and doing some of the same parks in different seasons.
How much time do you spend in each park?
Depends. A place like Kruger, I can be there for 6 weeks, 2 months. It's so big, it's 300 kilometers long. It's one of the biggest protected areas in Africa. Small place like Bonteheuwel National Park near Swellendam is really small, so a couple of days.
Amazing. Well, you said that your next Year in the Wild is currently in progress.
Yes.
How can people follow your journeys, take a look at your pictures, read some of your writing?
Sure. I've got a website, yearinthewild.com. Facebook, just search for me, Year in the Wild. And I also write for a number of magazines and newspapers and websites. I write for for News 24 Travel as well. So you can follow me on there and check where I am and the articles I'm writing and the photos I'm taking.